George Miller had only been in the city for a few months, and already the silence of his new apartment was starting to get to him. At 29, he'd taken a leap of faith. New job, new place, new everything. But there was something about coming home to an empty apartment every night that made him feel incomplete. That changed the day he adopted Crosby. Crosby was everything George didn't know he needed. Loyal, affectionate, a walking tail-wagging mood boost. They clicked from day one, quickly falling into a routine of morning walks, shared couch time, and the occasional game of tug-of-war that Crosby always seemed to win. But as the months passed, George began to notice something strange. Crosby, who used to run to the door the second George walked in, had started acting different. He wasn't sick. He wasn't hurt. But something had his full attention. Something George couldn't see. Every time George walked into the living room, Crosby would be sitting completely still, staring at one specific spot on the wall. No barking, no whining, just staring, as if he was trying to will the wall to speak back. At first, George thought it was just a weird phase. Maybe Crosby saw a shadow or was hearing something in the pipes. Dogs are quirky like that, right? But then it started happening every day. Same wall, same spot, same blank stare. One night, George got home late and called Crosby's name. No response. He walked into the living room, and there he was again. Stone still, eyes fixed on the wall like it held some ancient secret. George waved his hand in front of the dog's face. Nothing? That was the final straw. George decided to set up a small night vision camera in the corner of the room to see if Crosby was just doing this while he was around, or if it happened when he wasn't home too. The footage the next morning gave him a new mystery. When George was gone, Crosby was completely normal. It was only when he was home that the staring resumed. Weird, right? George was officially freaked out. His mind spun with possibilities. Was something inside the wall? A leak? A rodent? Or was Crosby trying to tell him something more serious? The next evening, George sat down beside Crosby and joined the staring contest. He pressed his ear to the wall. Nothing. Knocked on it. Solid. But as he leaned in closer, Crosby began to bark, not aggressively, but excitedly, like, finally, you're getting it. Encouraged, George got down on all fours, scanning the wall more carefully. That's when he heard it. A faint sound. So soft, he thought he imagined it at first. Then he heard it again. It was a tiny cry. He followed the sound to a small spot just beneath the light switch, where the wall paneling didn't quite align. Instinct kicked in. George rushed for his toolbox, grabbed a screwdriver, and carefully began removing the baseboard panel. It was a tight space, but behind it was a small gap leading deeper into the wall. Without hesitation, he slid his arm inside, reaching around blindly. His heart was pounding. Then, he felt fur. He gently pulled, and out came a small, trembling kitten. Dusty, scared, and barely old enough to stand, the little creature blinked up at him with huge eyes. George just sat there, stunned. How in the world did a kitten end up inside his wall? Even stranger, Crosby didn't bark or jump around. He calmly sat down and began gently sniffing the kitten as if saying, "There you are. I told him you were in there." And that's when it hit George. The kitten looked just like the neighbor's cat that had passed away a few months earlier. Crosby had been close with that cat, and the neighbor's dog too. They were his best friends. When they died, one after the other, Crosby was heartbroken, withdrawn, quiet. George hadn't realized how deep that grief had gone until now. Could it be that Crosby sensed something in this kitten, a familiarity, a new friend in need? Whatever it was, one thing was clear. Crosby had found her, and he wasn't letting her go. George, however, wasn't sure what to do. He wasn't a cat guy. He didn't know the first thing about raising a kitten, so, like any responsible pet parent, he took her to the vet the next morning. The vet said she was about 6 weeks old, dehydrated, but otherwise healthy. No microchip. No one had reported a missing kitten in the neighborhood. In other words, she was a stray. George thought about taking her to a shelter. He even asked the vet if that would be a good idea. The vet looked him dead in the eye and said, "If you drop her off at the county shelter, there's a very real chance she won't make it out. They're overwhelmed. Over 300 kittens already in need of homes. I wish I could sugarcoat it, but that's the truth." George felt a knot in his stomach. He looked down at the kitten, tiny, fragile, innocent. He thought about Crosby, how happy he had been since the kitten arrived, how his tail wagged again, how the light had come back in his eyes. That night, George made his decision. He wasn't looking for a cat, but maybe, just maybe, the universe had sent her anyway. Not for George, but for Crosby. He named her Lil Ray Ray. Don't ask him why, it just felt right. Crosby approved. The two of them became inseparable almost instantly. They played together, napped together, and occasionally caused complete chaos in the living room. Crosby, once withdrawn and lonely, was now full of energy again. George couldn't believe the transformation. Looking back, George still doesn't know how the kitten got into the wall. Maybe she was born in the crawl space. Maybe she wandered in and got stuck. Maybe, just maybe, Crosby knew she was there long before anyone else did. What he does know is this: when your dog starts staring at the wall like he's trying to send you a message, pay attention. Sometimes the wall is just a wall. Other times, it's hiding something you didn't know you were missing. George moved to the city hoping to find a fresh start. What he ended up with was something even better: a dog, a kitten, and a reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, even behind a wall.